Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, for another very entertaining and very informative show today. The subject is Playwright James Garcia.
I'm the subject. That's great.
That's right. Raul H Castro. And James, it's more than one thing, and we are going to introduce him in a more complete fashion. But before we do, I want to do two things. The first one is to remind you that these shows, radio shows, are Facebook Live. So if you do Facebook, I'm asking you if you wouldn't mind finding our page at AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection and following the page and sharing the programs. This is very, very important to us, as I'm sure many of you know. This is one way to know who is out there listening and joining our shows, how many people we are reaching, etc. And the second thing that I want to do, this probably would be done like in the midpoint of the show or towards the end. But rather than doing that, I want to ask James Garcia, who is our special guest today, to do this right off the bat. There is a play, and, you know, James Garcia is a playwright. And there is a play, James. First of all, welcome to our show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask you to speak close to the mic if you don't mind. There is a play going on, James, and I would like to ask you to let the audience know, because, you know, maybe not everyone's going to stay for the whole show, and I really would like them to know.
Well, first of all, they should stay for the whole show.
That is right.
There's going to be interesting stuff at the end,
Definitely.
too, in the middle, in the beginning.
Yeah, we have an amazing show today. Raul Castro, yourself as a writer, as a playwright, and as an actor. You're also an actor, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes
when needed, right?
Yeah, sometimes I do that.
Yeah, so, but go ahead and take a couple minutes, or even, you know, as long as you want. Talk about the play that is going on right today, right now.
Okay, so as obviously you said at the top, I'm a playwright. I'm also a theater producer. Every once in a while, I direct and act. But right now, I have a show that was directed by Maria Amorocho, who is a really wonderful, longtime equity actress, professional actress here in the community. And she and I have a connection. Goes back about 12 years. She was one of the actors in a play that I did at ASU Gamage Auditorium called Voices of Valor. And this is her directorial debut.
Wow.
And this is a new piece that I've written. It's a new work in progress, if you will. I do shows every summer at Herberger Theater Center downtown on 2nd Street. And
so every year you come up with a play, basically.
Yeah,
you write
a
play and
new script.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
And I do it every year, and I use that space as often as a place to test new material, you know, try out new material. Some of the plays I've done there remain short one-act productions because it's done at lunchtime, so it's a lunchtime performance.
Interesting.
Which means you have to start and finish in 50 minutes, or they'll bring the hook and they'll drag you up.
50 minutes?
Yeah, in 50 minutes.
Wow.
So I've done shows there that sometimes have turned into full-length productions, like Voices of Valor was started there. The Raul Castro play began there. And so this piece is called Miranda's Curse. It is a little bit different than a lot of the work that I do in this regard. Everything I do is always influenced by current events or sometimes historical influence as well. This particular piece is an adaptation of a play by William Shakespeare called The Tempest. And The Tempest is one of his perhaps most well-known plays. And the original The Tempest takes place in the 1600s in the Caribbean, and it involves a wizard, a magical wizard who's exiled to an island, basically an abandoned island, and there are magical people on the island, including a fairy, if you will, called Ariel. So I've taken that play and I've set it in Ajo, Arizona, just outside of Ajo, Arizona.
Right.
And it's actually the play is set in a coffee house at the bottom of an 1,100-foot deep mine pit just outside of Ajo.
Okay.
This is an old copper mine. It's abandoned.
Right.
It's still there. And so I've set the play in that coffee house. It's called Miranda's Curse, and I've updated it a lot. It's basically a contemporary piece, although if you're watching the play, you don't know exactly what year it is. And I've flipped some things on its head. In the original, Prospero is the father, and he's a wizard. And in this place, I've changed that to a woman, Prospera. And Prospera has a daughter named Miranda.
Okay.
And Miranda is also a sorceress. She's also a wizard. So they're both they both have a lot of magic in them.
Okay.
And a lot of the play deals with kind of their relationship and Miranda's the fact that Miranda is turning 18 and she's ready to go out on her own, and she's been promised by her mother that she will get more power and that she will go on her own. But I also use the play as a way to comment on current events and where we are. And so, the play for me takes place on the border for a reason. I want people to be exposed to the world that we are in, the contemporary world of the Arizona-Mexico border.
So not only contemporary, but very much linked to Arizona.
Linked to Arizona, yeah. It's just outside of Ajo, Arizona.
Yeah.
Ajo, for people that don't know, is if you're driving to Rocky Point, you kind of have to go through Ajo if you're coming from Phoenix.
That's before you hit to it's close to Y and then
Lukeville.
Lukeville.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just north of Lukeville. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just before that nature preserve. There. And I said it there in part because I wanted to set it in the desert, but also because I went through Ajo not too long ago. And if you haven't been there recently, Ajo is filled with beautiful murals that people have painted. Some of them are Arizona artists, some artists who have kind of lived there now. They're sort of expats from some other community. And some international artists have painted some very beautiful murals. So it's kind of a living, breathing art gallery in some ways.
Right.
And that artwork makes its way into this play as well.
Great.
So.
Now, James, just for, so how long is this play going to be going on?
So right now, so the play is being staged. It only has 3 more performances.
3 more.
Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Okay.
And then we're going to try to find a space later in the summer. The play right now is 42 minutes long or 41 minutes long. And what I'd like ultimately is it to be a story that probably will go 60 or 70 minutes.
Okay.
So it'll probably be that long when I'm done with the work. And what I'd like to do is when I've completed that version of the work is do it here locally, maybe towards the end of the summer.
Got it.
Yeah,
So if people want to know more about it, can they go online somewhere?
The best way right now is to Google Miranda's Curse, Herberger Theater Center. Or you can just find us on Facebook. The name of my theater company is New Carpa. So New Carpa Theater Company. You can find us easily on Facebook, and the information is
Carpa
there.
obviously is a Spanish word.
Yeah, tent.
Right.
Sort of the
New
big,
Carpa
old
Theater.
circus tents.
That's your company?
That's my company.
Great.
That's my theater company.
Say it, can you repeat it again? What's
New Carpa Theater Company.
Got it.
You can find us on Facebook.
Yeah.
Or you can just go to the Herberger Theater website, and you'll see and find Miranda's Curse and Lunchtime Theater, because this is a lunchtime theater.
Thank you, James. I want to also let you know that the date today is May 16, 2019, because I know some people may watch this video later on.
Oh, yes.
We just want to make sure that this play
just
is
so you know,
going on
if you're watching it later,
days,
we'll be, I think our final performances are May 21st, 23rd, and 22nd and 23rd at the Herberger Theater, Lunchtime Theater.
Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Playwright James Garcia. We're going to talk about the American Dreamer. You call him, I assume it's
Raul
you.
Castro.
You call him the American Dreamer, Raul Castro. You wrote a play, and we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, with a very, very entertaining, informative show today. The topic is Playwright James Garcia, Raul H Castro. And you know, it's interesting because when I did this, the graphics, the images,
Yes.
you can't fit everything there. So I did put it on the fuller graphic. And I do want to say that the actual name, the fuller name is Playwright James Garcia, American Dreamer, Raul H Castro.
Yeah, the play is
we cannot eliminate those two words.
Oh, that's
They're
fine.
very
No, very important.
American Dream.
No, it's
because
relevant to the play.
I really like it because, you know,
Yeah.
these days we talk about the dreamers.
Yes.
And so you basically are saying that he was an American dreamer.
Yeah, I think of him. The full name of that production is American Dreamer: The Life and Times of Raul H Castro.
Right.
And I called it American Dreamer. It had a couple of different names actually early on. But then I finally settled on American Dreamer because I kind of see him as, in some ways, as the original dreamer.
Of
right?
course.
We talk about dreamers now. He crossed undocumented in 1918 with his family, and then eventually in the 30s got naturalized after he had gone to college. He got naturalized and then became a judge. And became as you know, governor, of course, and 3-time U.S. ambassador. And so in many ways, you know, when we talk about the dreamers of today, those kids that have come here, a lot of them undocumented, brought by their parents,
Right.
and they get educated here, and many of them go to college, and you know, and they're Americans, right?
Right.
They're Americans, and they're living the American dream, if you will, or trying to.
Yeah.
And so he kind of paralleled that. He just
Right.
did it in a different era.
Right.
He did it back before
And
the Great
James,
Depression.
I'm amazed because if I'm not mistaken, we already did a show on Raul Castro early
I remember
on
did
when
one,
we
yeah, about him, just about him.
began, when we launched this platform. It's on, the video is on our page if you care to go back and watch that too. But you actually became the spokesperson of the family. Is that
Well,
correct?
yeah, because I have a communications background
Right.
and I did do communications work. After I had met the family and done research and interviews with Governor Castro and wrote the play, I just became friends with the family.
Right.
And then ultimately, when they needed to, you know, kind of publicize something, you know, I would just, you know, do some work for them. And then when he passed away, I became a spokesperson for the family. For the memorial services and
Right.
the funeral services. So that was in
Yeah.
2015.
And, you know, obviously to do a play, you really have to dive into his, you know, kind of study his life and do interviews and talk to people. And before we go deeper into that element or aspect of your getting into his life and really getting to know the details of Raul H Castro, which, by the way, he was a Mexican-American. He was a governor. I mean, he was a governor, an ambassador, a judge. I mean, you name it. He was a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of who he was and what motivated you to do the play and all that. But before that, I really would like to ask you, who is James Garcia? Tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, where you were born and how you came to Arizona, and then how you got into theater, how you became a playwright. If you kind of take us through the process.
Sure. I'm actually originally, I was born in Chicago. And the way I got to Chicago is like a lot of people from my generation and my parents' generation, my father was a steel worker. So in the 40s and 50s, there were a lot of, particularly men, who came up from Mexico, a lot of them from northern Mexico, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, those states, and they went to the Midwest to work in the steel foundries, Gary, Chicago, East Chicago, all of those cities. And so back in the heyday of the American steel industry, that's where they found work. They found a lot of work there. And so my father was one of those people. He ended up working 35 years in the steel industry.
Wow.
And then retired and went home to live in the house where he was born.
In Nuevo León?
Yeah, in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, so my connection, that's how I got from Chicago. But I also have a lot of roots in South Texas and the border area and the Southwest. And I've
What
been
towns?
now Laredo, San Antonio, Austin.
Okay.
I was in New Mexico for a little while, and then I came here. I've been here now for 18 years.
So this is when you were growing up as a young man in your early 20s. You're in Texas.
Yeah, back and forth. I mean, my mother. I lived with my mother. My parents divorced early, so I lived with my mother, and I like to say that she was. I was an Army brat, but nobody in my family was in the Army because she was always moving. You know, in the way that sort of those families do. And so, we'd be in South Texas in a little town, Pearsall, Texas, 1 minute, 5,400 people. And the next thing I knew, we were in New York City and Manhattan.
Amazing.
So we moved a lot.
This is because of your dad's employment?
No. My parents separated early.
Okay.
So this is just my mom was
Your mom,
a wandering sort of gypsy, if you will, right?
I
She
get
just
it.
sort of decided we need to go to New York City.
So
And,
the matter of the theater kind of thing, do you get it more from mom or dad?
Well, what's interesting is that I'm a writer by profession, and and I'm fortunate that that's what I became. But to be honest, it's a miracle that I became a writer. Because there were no books in my house.
Interesting.
I tell people growing up, the only two books that were in my house was the phone book.
Okay.
Back before the internet, people had phone books.
Right.
And the
I
Bible.
remember those.
Yeah, the phone book and the Bible. And I'm pretty sure we read the phone book more than we read the Bible.
Okay.
So
Seems
at least
to happen.
our family. And so I wasn't raised in a literary family. I wasn't raised with people that were exposed to the arts, and I came to it, definitely later in life and kind of by chance. I think the way I really got into theater was that I decided at some point that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really even know what that meant. It just was sort of a fantasy. And then I decided journalism was going to be my route. So I
Okay.
pursued that. And then, like
Did
a lot
you
of...
work as a journalist for
I
some
did.
companies?
I did.
What
I've worked
companies were
for
those?
many years as a journalist. My first job full-time in journalism was in Laredo, Texas. I had gone back to Texas, and I worked at a daily newspaper called the Laredo Morning Times.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
That's
that was
in English, right?
That's in English.
I assume that most of your writing jobs
yeah.
have been in English.
Yeah, most of my
Got it.
work has been
Got it.
and because I was raised here in the States, and like a lot of Latino kids, when you're very young, they beat the Spanish out of you at school, and
So in a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you speak Spanish or know the language? Do you give yourself
I
a
consider
9,
myself,
an 8, a 7?
I consider myself relatively fluent.
Okay.
Puedo hablar
Oh.
en español si
Perfect.
necesito hablar en español.
You got a 10.
Pero no lo puedo escribir, no
Right,
para
right.
por
Only
un
just to
profesional. No?
communicate.
Sí,
Right,
yeah, just to
perfect.
communicate.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's definitely, I would say, I'm a modestly fluent Spanish speaker.
Good.
But-
Because I have almost never had heard you speak in Spanish.
Yeah, no, it's the context, right? Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But going back to journalism and how it connects for me to the theater is that I decided that when I was very young, I read a lot of Ernest Hemingway. And Hemingway, before he became a novelist, was a journalist, right? He was famously a journalist in Spain during the Civil War there and so forth. And so somehow I just got it into my head very young. I thought, well, I want to write creatively, so journalism might be that route. And that's kind of what brought me to it. I think I gravitated towards theater and playwriting because so much of what journalism is you go out and you interview people, and you might do 3-4 hours of interviews and read a bunch of background, and then you have to turn it into a 600-word story, right? And a lot of what you're doing is you're synthesizing and you're capturing the quotes, right? You have to. So you really. And when you do that every single day and work 2 or 3 stories a day, depending on what newspaper you're working for, you get to meet so many people that you begin to hear and learn about the way people talk, right? Dialogue, people use certain accents or inflections or, expressions. And so that lends itself very well to creating dialogue in plays. And plays, as playwrights know, are stories told essentially in dialogue, as opposed to film, which is primarily stories told through images.
Right.
And although there's some beautifully written films, of course, but that's the primary distinction. And so I think I gravitated towards theater because of that, because of my journalism background.
Now let me ask you another question. How would you describe your work and subject matter of your plays? In other words, what are you looking for? Do they come to you? Do you think ahead? Oh, I would like to do a play on that. How does that come about?
I mean, I have to be, first of all, I have to be inspired by the subject.
So inspiration plays a big part.
Yeah, I don't, probably to my detriment, I don't necessarily think I want to write a story about such and such because it's going to sell a bunch of tickets and make a lot of money.
Okay.
And that's probably to my detriment. But I try to write stories that somehow something has touched me in the story. Sometimes those stories come from history, 2 or 3 plays like the Raul Castro play. Right? This is a historical figure, although I got to meet him when he was alive in real time, right? So So he was living, breathing history at the
Now,
same time.
he gave a speech at one of the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Were you there? Do you remember
I was
that
there.
speech?
I was there.
Wow.
I was actually working there at the time.
That is an amazing speech he gave there.
I was working there at the time, but I met him several years before that. And the way I met him was that I think it was his 91st birthday or something, or 90th birthday, and I went to his. I sort of crashed as a journalist. I crashed his birthday party and wanted to go report a story on it. And my interest was that I had no idea that the man was still alive. He was already into his 90s.
Right.
And so I went and I heard him speak when he spoke, and I thought this man is a walking play because he was such a gifted storyteller. Right. He had a gift with words.
Yeah. So let me ask you another question, because I had this question for later, but let me ask it now, James. How much do you think Latinos know about Raul H. Castro, and how much do you consider being important that we know more about him today?
I think with anyone who's the first, right? We should all know, who the first black man in space is, the first woman who, becomes an astronaut, the first woman on the Supreme Court, right? Sonia Sotomayor.
Right.
We should know who those people are because they're breaking ground, right? They're opening doors for the rest of us.
Of course.
And so that's one reason why we should know, who this gentleman is. We should also know who Castro is because, here was a guy who's a Latino, Mexican-born, raised here, became a citizen, and became governor in 1974, and at a time when there just weren't Latino governors anywhere in the country, right? I mean, and also Arizona. We think of Arizona now. It's got 1/3 of the population is Latino. Back then, it wasn't the case, right? So it was a much smaller Latino population, despite our long history.
These are the 70s, mid 70s.
So the fact that he became governor in that time in Goldwater country was really a miraculous feat,
right?
And it had a lot to do with the kind of person that he was. So we should know. We should know that. We should also know because of the kind of person he was, because he wasn't just governor. He wasn't. It wasn't like he was a bureaucrat and decided, I'm going to try to become governor.
So, what is it, 1, 2, 3 lessons that you feel that we would benefit from if we knew more about, the more details about his experience as a Mexican American, first governor, etc.
Yeah, I think first of all was his kind of philosophical approach to things, right? I think if I were to categorize him today, I would probably call him a conservative Democrat.
Interesting.
And if he wanted to, in today's age, he could probably cross over and be a kind of moderate to liberal Republican. I mean, in terms of his politics.
Right.
But to me, what was in some ways more interesting than any of that was the fact that he was the kind of person who basically said, if I hit a brick wall, what do? I'm going to go around. I'm going to bounce off. I'm going to go around. I'm not going to. And he had so many times in the course of his life where people basically said, you can't do this because you're Mexican. Literally to his face, would say that. You can't be a teacher because you're Mexican.
And
you can't work for the State Department. You can't be whatever. And, people said when he decided to run for governor, people were like, why would anybody elect you? Why do you think you're going to get rid of it? And his reply was always, has any of you ever tried it? Have you ever tried it before? So his attitude, I think, had a lot to do with who he became. And that's a good lesson in life for us all. Right? If you have something you're pursuing, and you're going to run into brick walls, you're going to fail sometimes, which is its own brick wall. You got to bounce off, and you got to figure out a way to go around if you want to do it.
We're going to have to go on our second break, but I want to read something, just kind of like words that I picked up. He refused to be restrained by limitations. Adversity was his angel. And actually, this is a title of one book I believe he wrote.
Of his memoir.
And then, don't complain. Do something about it. Create change. We will be right back. Stay with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Stay with us. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. The subject today, Playwright James Garcia, American Dreamer, Raul H. Castro. And this is actually a play that, James, you did how long ago this is?
I started writing that in 2009, actually, and have done it, staged it maybe 4 or 5 times since then.
And this is an amazing story about the first and only Mexican-American who became governor in the state of Arizona. So you can never say enough about this man. And I think all of us, it would do well to us if we learn more and are impressed about the life and the legacy of Raul H. Castro. I just kind of don't like the fact that that we know, especially the younger generations.
Well, you asked that question, like, do people know of him? And I think a lot of people don't. And I think that's one reason why it's important to do the play.
Right.
So that people, I would like at some point, and I better do it relatively soon, but I'd like at some point to do a biography about him so that there is a detailed biography. That hasn't been done.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us who know his story to talk about it. Right?
And I was given this book, Latina Heritage on Stage, dramatizing heroes and legends, and I don't think his is here. Or his play, or your play of him is here. I know El Che.
Who's that by?
This is by Guillermo, actually.
Oh,
I think it's, it says edited by Daniel Enriquez Perez.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just, there's just so much to learn from about this man, Raul H. Castro. But we have a new guest.
Ana Flores.
And I'm glad. Ana, thank you so much for joining our show.
Of course.
I understand you're a poet, an actress, and much more, but I'm going to ask James to kind of introduce her, and then...
Well, first I'll explain why she arrived a little late, because we have a performance of Miranda's Curse, which we talked about at the top of the show, happening now, and it ended at 1. And I came early, but she had to get over here.
So are you part of the play?
So she's
okay, because I look online and I saw a lady, and you're it.
Yes, that is
a
me.
young lady. That's good. So, well, let me ask her. Ana, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then a little bit about the play?
Yeah.
You know, what role you play and how you like it.
Yeah, so I have been acting actually with New Carpa Theater for like 6 years, and done some other film projects and stuff like that. But I also write poetry. I've been writing poetry since I was really, really young, like maybe 6 years old.
Wow.
So this is really a special project because both those things can sort of merge and live in the same piece. And the poetry that I've been focusing on for the last 4 years or so of my undergraduate career has been about the border and border states and border cities, Nogales and Tucson and Phoenix. So it was cool to finally have somewhere to put that energy in. And Miranda's Curse is like the perfect setting for those type of poems.
Right. So how do you know you're a poet? I mean, is this inspiration? I don't think you can study to be a poet, right?
I mean, like,
you can study,
You can study?
Yeah. So I mean, I originally went into college to be a journalist, actually, because I knew that I liked writing. But I never really called myself a poet. I knew that I wrote poems, and I did it a lot. I had journals of poetry. And then I took a poetry course in my sophomore year, and I met Rosemary Dombrowski, who's a poet laureate of Phoenix. And she was my professor, and she was like, hey, you have a lot of things here. You have a lot of material. And so she was sort of the first person who called me a poet, and then I was like, well, yeah, why not? So now I'm going to study poetry for my master's degree. So.
I see. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a poet that you like that you haven't memorized that you can kind of...
A poem?
A poem,
yeah.
Sorry, a poem.
Yeah.
You could do something from the play.
And anything you want,
from the play.
So that people kind of get a taste.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
I'll do a piece from the play since it's like in my mind. But this is sort of me praying to the mountains. So, it goes, I have come to ask you, Ajo Peak, Circle Canyon, to cut me a thin slice of harvest, a few dozen joints of my ancestors' harsh lives, a bouquet of my father's last hours. I see them, descending, tied to this rope, tied to this cliff, when a rock above my father comes loose and brains him. Who am I? stonewalled, 8th generation accident. I am the slope of your hills. I am the children. I am the half-built Ferris wheel peeking over the freeway. I am a congregation of saguaros worshiping the sun. The remains of the summer flail wildly on my mother's clothes hanger. This red wave tumbles in, dazzling with the limbs of bodies not my ancestors. No, these creatures are cursed with today. An orange crystal swarm, they run, aimless. I scream, I scream, I scream for them. Those lost people. Their yelling evaporates at the dry riverbed of their throats. I cry on their behalf. And in that sorrow, find my own wandering.
Thank you.
It's a good thing I memorized.
You
it,
know,
'cause
so another question I have for you is, when poetry obviously has a meaning, right?
Yeah.
Can you basically interpret all the meaning,
Oh,
or
yeah.
some? Oh, wow! So
There-
on this, what
especially
would be
for-
the essence of what you just
So I think-
recited?
I think I have other poems that I've performed, like, that are a lot more, I would say, concrete. But this poem is different because it's a prayer, because it's a, and so the language in it is sort of meant to be heard by God, or whatever that would mean. But essentially, I'm coming to the mountains and I'm saying, hey, I really want to know about my past. I don't have a father, and I want to know where I come from. So I'm coming to the mountains. I'm praying. I'm asking, can you please tell me? And in the poem, which is sort of after the play The Tempest, which I'm sure you've described already.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
You know, there's a storm that happens. So in the middle of this prayer, of this poem, I see the remains of the summer flailing on my mother's clothing. So I see this sort of wind gust happening, and then I describe what that looks like. Seeing those people lost in the storm makes me remember my own idea of being lost, which is my father. And so,
Wow.
Thankfully, there's a lot of bells and whistles that theater provides that allowed for me to write a poem in which I don't have to say, I am going to the mountains to pray. I am asking, because you can sort of see my father come in, you can see my mother come in. There's a lot, which I normally do. I do read a lot of poems, at open mics and stuff, but I never have that opportunity.
You don't usually have sound effects.
I don't usually have sound effects,
Right.
light effects, all of these different things. I usually don't perform a poem. Usually I'm reading a poem.
Is that like a more? I guess it's so yours that even when you perform it, it comes out. I guess with a lot of feeling, emotion,
there's
reality.
There's no real reason to fake anything
Wow.
about a poem, because it can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Right. And James, if I'm not mistaken, you told me that you found Anna's acting. You saw her once. How was that connection?
I went to Carl Hayden High School.
Right.
And they were doing a play that the kids had written there called Should We Stay or Should We Go? And it was basically should we stay or should we go after the passage of SB 1070?
Wow.
Right? That's what they were talking
It was
about.
a year after SB 1070.
That's
passed.
even a song, a
Yeah.
lyric of a song.
yeah,
should
yeah,
I
yeah.
stay or
Yeah,
should
yeah,
I
no,
go?
that's-
yeah, I know
Something
what
you're
like
talking
that.
I don't know if they played that
Okay.
during the show.
But I went to see that on the invitation of her teacher, her drama teacher, and there were 25 or 30 kids in the show. It was a big cast. And when it was all said and done, I thought to myself, after I'd seen her perform, I thought, that girl can act.
Yeah,
She's the one
yeah.
that has some real talent, and ended up casting her in a play as a
Yeah.
result of that.
I haven't been a theater person, the one that goes to watch plays, but I watched American Mariachi, and
You went to see American Mariachi. Lovely
it was
play.
amazing. And then I watched other more quote unquote mainstream, and I also loved it. So a lot of things is going on. Much is going on in the realm of the arts. That do you feel like the Latino community needs more awareness so that they can know more about it and kind of go and enjoy these kinds of plays?
I want to hear Anna's view on this as well, because she's a
Yeah,
different generation.
Right.
Obviously. She's a couple of generations removed from me.
Right,
But
yeah.
the in my view, I think for a long time, of course, it's been the case that our community has not been able to see stories about themselves on stage or on film, right?
Okay,
And
right.
that's starting to happen. It's starting to happen. I mean,
So the arts at this level, at the community level, at your level, that affords the opportunity for the Latinos to see more the characters such as themselves, the storylines.
No, I think so. But I also think that really all across the board, whether it's at community theater or on a national stage or in film, that we're only kind of really beginning to get more of our art seen, more of ourselves seen on stage and on film and that sort of thing. But a good example is that, like, when I came here and started doing theater, it was almost impossible to see Latino theater on anyone's stage except mine, Teatro Bravo, which is another theater company that is here. Now, right now, literally as we speak, Mesa Encore Theater has In the Heights being staged, which is a Manuel Miranda play, which is based in the Bronx, a lot about Dominicans, Puerto Rican community.
Right.
And then there's a piece at Phoenix Theater that's being developed called Americano.
Right.
Americano is about a young man who's a dreamer from Arizona. It's an original musical. You just saw American Mariachi, which is a play with music. It's not a musical, but it's a play with music. Arizona Theater Company did that. Child's Play Theater Company has 2 shows coming up in its next season that are Latino themed. So what's happening is that I think a number of the major organizations are starting to realize, I think belatedly, but realize that 30% of the population is Latino here, and in a generation, it could be that half of the population is Latino, and you better start writing shows that tap them. Otherwise, you're not going to have an audience.
Right. And Ana, just briefly, we have to go on our last break. What is your impression about how Latinos are gravitating into this art of theater?
Yeah, I mean, I think to echo what James said, there's a lot of Latinos here, so there's just like no way to not confront art being made by them or to consume art, And I think at least for people that I see at open mics and things like that, it just makes sense. I think we're all taking ourselves more seriously, and so that's reflected in all sorts of different spheres, but the art sphere definitely.
Do you believe that we can attract the Latino community to go and enjoy this art?
I believe so.
Definitely.
Is that growing already? You see some signs. I mean, I think the American Mariachi, I guess they sold out.
Well, American Mariachi,
shows.
American Mariachi actually sold more tickets this season than any other Arizona theater company show.
Period.
So, yes,
I mean,
period.
mainstream,
now,
quote unquote.
The show had to appeal and did to all audiences.
Right.
But one of the reasons it did that was because a lot of Latinos went to see that show. Right?
Perfect.
So
stay with us. We're going to go on our last break. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. The show today is Playwright James Garcia, American dreamer Raul H Castro. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Let me remind you that if you do Facebook, you're listening probably by radio. If you do Facebook when you get home, when you have time, look for our page, AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Follow our page and help us to get it to more people. We are addressing, 3 objectives of this platform is to educate, celebrate, and connect. And we celebrate Latino accomplishments. And I mean, look at these 2 guests that we have today, very, very successful Latinos. And we really, really want to continue to highlight and celebrate Latino accomplishments. Obviously, the educational piece is here. And by doing this, we connect communities. So thank you for helping us to reach more people by following and sharing our page. Let's come back. We have roughly another 10 minutes. Let's come back, James, to this play. So I guess, can you share with the audience, I guess, the beginning of that moment when you realized you wanted to do a play on Raul H. Castro? And I have to believe that given his life, it wasn't that hard to find content about this man, right?
I think it may have been a bug planted in my brain anyway, because when I lived in Texas and worked as a journalist there and studied at the university, I'd heard that there were only 3 Latino governors in the history of the United States, and he was one of them.
Right.
So I knew he existed at some point.
Right.
But I thought, again, he had passed away by the time I came here because he was in his 90s, right?
Okay.
But then when I realized he's having a birthday party, and I went to the birthday party just to watch him speak.
This is where in
Nogales.
Nogales.
In Nogales.
Okay.
And I went to his birthday party, and I heard him speak. And because theater is dialogue, right? I mean, people go on stage and they talk, and you have to be engaged as an audience member. The fact that he was so engaging as a deliverer of speeches, right? I mean, as an orator, I knew immediately this man should be a play.
Right.
His story should be a play. And then, of course, he became very, very good about telling his story on stage. So you got to hear all of these little bits and pieces.
Right.
He was a boxer, he was a teacher, he
right.
was a hobo. In the Great Depression, and on and on and on. And so all of those are like great pieces of a great story.
And in his life, one sees that he basically went through a lot of eras, if you will. The Mexican Revolution.
Yes.
His dad.
Yes.
Then the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Right?
I like to say that he lived the history of Arizona, right? Because the history of Arizona
that is right.
started in 1912.
That is right.
He came here in 1918.
He was born in 1916.
He was born in 1916
right.
in just across the border. It'll come to me. But he was born in Sonora. He was born in Sonora.
Oh, Cananea.
Cananea. He was born in Cananea.
Of course.
And then came here in 1918. And so you're right. He lived during the Mexican Revolution, the Great Depression, the 60s, the radical 60s, if you will.
Amazing.
And then after he was a U.S. ambassador to Argentina, he came back to the United States and he practiced law for 40 years before.
Okay, so let's kind of review a little bit more systematically, if you don't mind, because his story is so amazing. So again, he's Mexican. He crosses the border. Eventually,
ilegal.
Right.
He cruzó ilegal.
Right, and then he becomes a U.S. citizen, and then he becomes a teacher. Obviously, he went to college.
He tried to become a teacher. He studied to be a teacher, but they wouldn't hire him on the board.
They wouldn't hire him, and then that's when he went out and
became a hobo.
Right. He went to Oklahoma, I believe, to work in the fields, I believe.
All over the country.
Right.
All over the country.
And then he comes back, and then he picks up a job, I think, with the government, the State Department. And then he kind of sees, I guess that opens his eyes to more about the system, if you will, of America.
Yeah.
Then he
and then he went to law school.
There in Tucson, I believe.
There in law school at the University of Arizona.
He played football.
He played football in high school. Yeah, but he went to law school. And then after law school, he entered politics and became a judge. He was a lawyer for a little while and became a judge.
An attorney, then a deputy attorney for Pima County.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the judge for Pima County, and then a judge in the Superior Court in Pima County.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then he ran once for governor.
He ran for governor and he lost by about 4,000 votes in his first try. And then he ran again and he won by about 4,000 votes.
And just the fact that he ran again, right? So he never, and let me enter.
He was relentless. He didn't give up.
Yeah, let me enter into this. I guess we have to address this matter. I told you off the air that I had watched this PBS show with Jose Cárdenas.
Yeah.
And
Horizonte.
Horizonte, and then Danny Ortega was there, and it was very evident that he was of a different philosophy, if you will, than the Chicano movement folks, you know, the ones that were basically on the streets, protesting, marching, and he took a different approach. Can you elaborate just on that, James?
Yeah, I think, and this was one of the reasons back in the day, back in the 70s, that he and people like Alfredo Gutierrez were kind of at loggerheads, because Alfredo Gutierrez was someone who believed in challenging the system.
And let's also highlight that Alfredo Gutierrez was also, I mean, I hope I can have him on the show once, because he's also a Latino leader, right?
Oh, you know, he's a brilliant,
in every sense of the word.
He's a brilliant political thinker.
Right. So they
rich life. Yeah.
They too had a differences.
They just didn't get along back in that day, and it was because of their styles. Because Raul Castro was the kind of person who believed that you worked in the system, you worked inside the system to change it. Right?
Okay.
And he had the kind of gift that he was able to actually get some things done.
Right.
And so he came up through the system and believed ultimately that that's the way you did it. And he really didn't hold in high regard people like Cesar Chavez and Alfredo Gutierrez and Danny Ortega.
Really?
Because even though he thought, you know, these are smart people, he just thought they're going about it the wrong way.
Okay.
They shouldn't be out there. You know, he called them glass breakers, right?
Glass breakers. So when he governed for Arizona, he was actually very aware of this effort of Latinos, but he just didn't agree with the approach.
Yeah, he just didn't agree with their approach. And the thing, you know, the irony is that he needed Chicanos to vote for him,
right?
You know, to get elected.
So he couldn't,
right? They had to vote for him.
He couldn't be too vocal, you know, against him, right?
It was a style thing. I mean, I don't think he necessarily went around and kind of publicly insulted people, but it was just a different style. It was a different approach, and you know, and I think that's kind of a long-running argument in society in general.
Even
right?
today?
Yeah, sure. Do you work within the system? Do you somehow crash the system from the outside?
Right.
Right. Do you know? And I think it's you know, it's a I think that I've jumped back and forth. Sometimes I've been inside, and sometimes I've jumped outside.
And then let's face it, some Latinos prefer to be considered and be seen as Americans, and then others, they are very proud of their heritage and they want to show it off, you know, or not show it off, but show it. And so there's always, I mean, just the very fact that I have two shows. Have you noticed I have a Tuesday show in Spanish?
Yeah,
a Thursday show in English. It kind of resembles that aspect of our culture that, you know, there seems to be those kind of two angles. One,
although I would say this, that I think that certainly Alfredo Gutierrez and Danny and so forth would tell you, you know, we're as American as anyone. And
of course.
We just want you to know that we don't think the system is treating us fairly, and we're going to challenge it. Right, we're going to challenge the basic tenets of the system.
Before
someone like Castro somehow believed that he could still work in the system and get things done.
Right. Anna, did I hear right that you participated in the play in Tucson about Raul Castro?
I helped behind the scenes. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the experience you had? I mean, any impressions that you remember having?
I distinctly remember Raul Castro's house, his home, his wife. Had a little sign above their stove that was like, their queen doesn't cook or something like that.
Interesting.
So they were very much like Nogalenses, like, you know, they were from Nogales, right? They lived there at least. Yeah, I mean, he was so bright. He was so much older, but he was so bright.
Yeah. In your school experience, and I mean high school experience, I mean, you got involved with theater.
Yeah.
Was Raul Castro known among your peers?
Definitely not.
Right, yeah, because I get that impression.
Did he even get mentioned in college? The 4 years of college?
Yeah, so we have to do more about that, James.
It's
we
important.
have to do more because I think it's important that our community, you know, I mean, he's the first and only Mexican-American governor Arizona has had.
Yeah.
I mean, this gentleman, what's his name, the one that just tried to the run and didn't make it?
Oh, David Garcia.
David Garcia, you know. So it's not an easy thing to be a governor, and he made it. So, So, James, I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot because, but I know you have good memory and you will remember.
Oh, no,
remember
I don't have
the
good memory.
the governor that gave a speech, I believe it was in Douglas, and that he says that one of these kids, barefooted kids.
Oh, yes. That's in the play, and it's in his memoir.
Can you tell that to the audience? I think that's an amazing
Yeah, I mean,
anecdote.
think about it again. We talked earlier about how Governor Castro lived the history of Arizona.
Right.
So he was at a park in Douglas as a boy when the first governor of the state, Governor Hunt, came to visit. I don't know if he was campaigning or he was just, I think he was there on the 4th of July is actually what it was. And so that governor came and he delivered a speech. And during the speech, he looked down in the audience and he saw, these Mexican kids, local Douglas kids.
I thought they were
Sin
barefooted.
zapatos, whatever. Yeah. And he stopped and he said something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, here in Arizona, why, even one of these barefooted Mexican boys might be your next governor, right? And Castro, tells the story that he was looking at me, right?
Amazing.
Because he was there and happened to be one of those kids.
45 years later,
Right? Yeah.
that was fulfilled.
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing. So let's kind of close the show here. And coming back to what would you tell the audience in terms of learning more about arts, getting involved, coming to the place? I mean, what would you say to them about what is art? What is art does that maybe a movie doesn't do?
Theater.
Or theater.
Yeah, I think theater allows you an audience to be more part of the experience. We're relying on each other to create this moment. So I think that if you want to be not just moved, but sort of part of this singular moment, then it's just a deeper experience, I think.
Yeah. Sometimes you do theater and you're literally this far from the actor.
Right.
I mean, you might be 4 or 5 feet from the actor. And the thing about a theatrical performance, and probably to some degree, certainly with poetry, is that every single time you do it, it's not exactly the same.
Right.
Right. If you pop in a DVD or to watch a film, every single time you watch it, it's going to be
And
exactly the same.
I was thinking about that as I was coming to the studio.
Yeah.
When you watch a movie, it's taped. It's going to be the same thing. The
Done.
theater is
Yeah.
not, right?
No. Every single time you go, the actor has to, because we're human beings.
Yeah.
They do something just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so each one is a unique experience.
Ana Flores, thank you so very much
Thank
for
you.
joining us, and congratulations. You're very young, and I'm sure you have a career ahead of you on the arts. And James,
Thank you.
thank you so very much. And we'll do more shows on this topic. I think
That's
it's
fantastic.
I think you're becoming a believer of me and in the arts, and you're attracting me. So if I assume that many others are going through this experience, I'm going to also influence my family to go and watch the plays every
I
once
should
in a while.
mention one other thing. So we have Miranda's Curse next
Yeah.
week. So come to that show. Also in the fall, I'm developing a new play called American Pastorela, The Road to Impeachment.
Got it. Well, thank you so very much for joining our show. This is all the time we have for now. Thank you so much. Don't forget to follow our page, AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Have a great day.